Hello, and welcome to our first video for section 3.1 about extraction of roots. This is a method we're going to go over in a minute for how to solve a quadratic equation. But first, just some basics of what is a quadratic equation. Here's the definition. A quadratic equation can be written in the standard form here, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So that's the standard form of a quadratic equation. And the b and c can be any real numbers. They could be 0, but the a must not be 0. Here's a quick example. We want to see which of these two equations are quadratic equations. And if so, let's try to write them in standard form. So with this first one, it's not written this way yet. It doesn't have a 0 on the right side, which it should in standard form. But we could do that if you subtract the 16 from both sides. It will look like 3w squared minus 16 equals 0. Now, this still doesn't look quite like this standard form here, but remember the b and c are allowed to be any real numbers including 0, so we could write this as 3w squared plus 0 times w minus 16 equals 0. That's the same thing as that equation. And so yes, this is quadratic. And the values of a, b, and c are a equals 3, b is 0, and c is negative 16. And how about with this next one? Let's see. It already has 0 on the right side, which it should in standard form. And you could write it as 0 times y squared plus 3y minus 16 equals 0. The problem is that the a is not allowed to be 0, so this is not quadratic. It is actually linear. Okay, now I want to go on to a graphing exercise, which I would like you to do on your own, but I'll give you a big hint reminder thing before you get started, and that is to remember that anything squared is always greater or equal to 0. For example, if you have negative 3 squared, negative 3 squared means negative 3 times negative 3. That is equal to 9. And if you enter it into your calculator, it's important to do it that way. Because if you do it like this, if you write negative 3 squared, your calculator and I will interpret that as 3 squared and then make it negative, like this. So 3 squared is 3 times 3, and that will give you negative 9. But if you want to plug in x equals negative 3 into this, the thing you're squaring is negative 3, so that should go like, it should become 9. And to do that on your calculator, it's important to keep that in mind and type it like this, with parentheses, and then the negative number symbol here, not to be confused with the subtraction thing. And you could either do it with this with this x squared button, that should give you 9. You could also do it, well, remember if you type this minus 3 squared like that, it thinks you're trying to do a left parentheses minus 3 with subtraction, which isn't what you're trying to do. That gives you an error, so we can fix it and replace that with that. And anyways, if you do that to the power 2, that will do the same thing. This button gives you exponents. That should also give you 9. But if you just write negative 3 and then squared, you're going to get negative 9, which is not what you want here. So anyways, I'll give you a moment to fill this in. I mean, you're going to give yourself a moment to fill it in and pause it, and I'll show you the answers after that. So your graph should come out looking something like this. You notice y here represents the result of squaring something, so we only get positive y coordinates, which is a thing that happens a lot of the time with quadratic equations. The shape of this is called a parabola. It is not a line because it curves, and it has this gentle sort of bend at the bottom. It should look sort of round, not like a sharp corner. Okay, I also want to do a quick example of using this previous graph to solve an equation. This is a really simple example, but it's good to go over solving equations using a graph because you guys did badly on that on the first test. So how do we solve an equation using the graph? Well, remember that this equation is y equals x squared. So everywhere in the graph, y and x squared are the same thing. So asking this question is essentially like saying, what value or values of x makes y equal to 4? I'm just replacing the x squared here with y because y and x squared are the same thing. So let's look and see where is y equal to 4 on the graph. That is right here. And the solutions are the values of x that make that happen, which look like there's a value of x that's 2 and another value of x that's negative 2. And that agrees with what we had from the table here, where plugging in both negative 2 for x and 2 make this result come out to be 4. So you can see that there's two solutions of this equation, which are x equals negative 2 and x equals 2. And when you have two things like this that are both solutions, we usually just combine that into one little equation, and we just say x is positive or negative 2. And we'll look more at this example, an example of solving things by graphing like this in the next video.